On a late April afternoon, Seattle's skies still hung with a misty drizzle, just enough to leave streaked trails on the windows of the storefront. Across the street, Graham Ellison pulled his silver-gray hoodie tighter around him, the frayed cuffs fitting snug beneath his delivery gloves. Passers-by streamed past him as if he were just another food courier among the hundreds scattered across Capitol Hill, no one recognizing that the middle-aged man with a salt and pepper beard was the very founder of Harvest and Hearth, the once iconic health food restaurant chain that had redefined dining across the Pacific Northwest. But his gaze was not that of a casual customer. It was the gaze of a man who had spent 2 decades building an empire on trust, now watching it splinter at the very location he had once held the highest hopes for store number 9. Since expanding to 9 locations and handing over management responsibilities to the operations division, Graham had begun hearing stories that never made it into the reports. 2 handwritten letters had arrived at headquarters within 3 weeks, not emails, not app reviews, and they made him stop cold. One of them simply read, "No one here cares anymore." The words were short, not angry, just the cold resignation of a once loyal customer. The Capitol Hill location still looked pristine as he glanced at it, gleaming glass windows, polished steel signage, and warm Edison bulbs glowing from the high ceiling. But Graham knew better than anyone that appearances were the easiest to manipulate. He stepped through the door and immediately felt the difference, not the familiar welcome of Harvest and Hearth, but a cold, detached air. The cashier remained motionless. A young man chewing gum didn't even look up as he muttered, "Next." Graham placed his order, grilled chicken salad, no dressing, add avocado. He accepted the $3 surcharge without flinching, took his numbered receipt, and sat by the window. From that spot, he had a partial view of the open kitchen. 2 young women stood at the front, one scrambling to pack to-go orders, hunched over, eyes hollow from fatigue. The other, younger, leaned against a fridge, scrolling on her phone, unconcerned. "Sky, can you prep the bowl for table 6? The older one called out. "I'm on break," Sky replied without even looking up. "I just clocked in." "Then take a break," she shrugged defiantly. A burly man with a shaved head and a stained apron appeared. "Where's the chicken for this salad?" he barked. "In the back," someone answered. The man Graham would later learn his name was Darren didn't bother checking the stockroom. He grabbed a random exposed chicken breast from the stove, chopped it bare-handed without checking the temperature or smell. Then the lettuce he pulled out wilted yellowed greens from the cold tray and tossed them straight into the bowl. Half an avocado, already browning, was gouged with his fingers and plopped onto the salad with a thud. Graham swallowed the rising anger. When the dish was placed in front of him by a server named Nina, who apologized more with her eyes than with words, he picked up a fork, speared a bite, and tasted it. The texture was slimy, the chicken cold, the avocado tasted like it had been sitting for 2 days. In that moment, 17 years of hard-earned legacy felt betrayed by a single bowl of salad. Graham stood, carrying the bowl to the counter. "I'd like to speak to your manager," he said, his tone calm but firm. Nina hesitated, then disappeared into the back. He stood there in a restaurant with just a few scattered customers, but it felt as though he was staring into the hollow of a system slowly rotting from within. And he knew if he didn't act now, the next thing left to spoil wouldn't be just a salad, it would be the very soul of the brand he built. When the kitchen door opened, a man in a tight black t-shirt, silver chain around his neck, and a phone pressed to his ear stepped out. He glanced at Graham with a rehearsed smile, the kind anyone who's ever worked in the service industry can spot instantly, equal parts defensive and fake. "I'm Troy, the manager of this location," he said, slipping his phone into his pocket without bothering to remove the earpiece. "Is there a problem?" Graham held up the salad bowl, not raising his voice, not angry, but each word honed with precision. "I just witnessed your kitchen staff use unrefrigerated chicken breast, wilted lettuce, and scoop browning avocado with bare hands to make this dish." Troy raised an eyebrow, still speaking lightly. "All our ingredients are prepped fresh daily, per standard." "I said I saw it with my own eyes," Graham emphasized. He wasn't wearing gloves, didn't check the temperature, and prepared a guest's food with complete indifference. Troy glanced toward the kitchen, then turned back with a forced tone. "I'll speak with him. You want a refund?" "No," Graham replied, his eyes sweeping the service counter where Nina was rushing through orders while Skye continued scrolling lazily on her phone. "I want you to bring out every staff member on this shift, right now." Troy frowned, clearly unsure what was happening. "Who are you?" Graham slowly removed his cap, then lowered his glasses, revealing a face he knew only longtime staff would recognize. "I'm the founder of Harvest and Hearth, and you just allowed your head cook to toss trash into a salad bowl and call it a meal." For a moment, the entire restaurant seemed to freeze. Nina stood stunned, mouth slightly open, unable to speak. Skye glanced at Graham, then back at her phone, as if hoping to disappear. Troy took a half step back, his face drained of color. Graham didn't yell, didn't scold. He simply stood there, still holding the cold salad bowl, an irrefutable piece of evidence. "This restaurant will be closed today," he said, his voice low but firm. "We're going to find out what's really happening here and start over." Troy tried to collect himself. "I didn't know Darren was working like that. I'm not in the kitchen every second." Graham looked him square in the eyes. "You're the manager. If you don't know what's happening during your shift, that's your failure, not your staff's. Or worse, you did know and ignored it. Either way, you're unfit to continue." At that moment, Graham asked all on-duty staff to step forward. Nina paused her order-taking and called 4 others to the front. Luis, a sous chef wearing dish gloves, Tessa, a petite platinum blonde girl from the cold station, Benny, the tattoo-covered cashier, and a middle-aged cook wiping sweat behind the glass kitchen wall. Skye remained still. "You too," Graham said, his eyes fixed on the younger woman. She reluctantly slid her phone into her pocket and approached with obvious irritation. Graham looked around at the group, then asked a question so simple it pierced straight to their core. "Does anyone here feel this restaurant is being run properly?" No hands went up. He continued, "Has anyone here ever felt that their input was truly heard?" Silence again. Then his gaze landed on someone he didn't expect to speak, Luis, the sous chef with wet gloves still on. "What's your name?" Graham asked. "Luis Delgado. I've been here almost a year." "Do you like your job?" Luis shrugged slightly, then looked over at Nina. "I used to. But things changed when Troy became manager. Shifts got tighter, no coverage when people call off. Nina's been doing double since last week." Nina didn't say anything, but her eyes confirmed every word. Graham nodded slowly. He turned to Tessa. "What about you?" The young woman bit her lip. "I've been running the cold station alone since Monday. It's supposed to be a 2-person job." He looked directly at Troy, now leaning against the counter, arms folded, eyes avoiding contact. "You call that efficient staffing?" Troy muttered. "It was direction from above. I was just following orders." "No," Graham cut in. "We never directed you to abandon food safety standards. We never authorized burning out the team or letting people like Skye idle while others collapse from exhaustion." He turned to Skye. "Why did you apply here?" "Because it's close to my house." "And you think proximity is enough reason to disregard customers? To not work, not support your team?" Skye didn't answer. "I didn't." "Clock out, you're not a fit for this place." She looked toward Troy, but Graham said firmly, "He can't help you, and he's about to go too." The room fell utterly silent. Graham looked back at the rest of the staff. "Who among you has kept this place standing all this time?" This time he didn't need a reply. Their eyes said it all. And in that moment, the path to rebuilding had officially begun. When Darren, the head chef whom Graham had just called out, stepped out from the stainless steel door at the back, he was still chewing the last bite of his sandwich, holding a stained kitchen rag in one hand. He glanced at Graham, then at Troy, as if trying to gauge whether this summons was actually serious. "You called me?" "You made that salad for me 5 minutes ago," Graham said flatly. Darren shrugged. "I make a lot of salads." "Let me ask again. Did you use chicken that had been left at room temperature, didn't check the smell, didn't wear gloves, and threw wilted greens on the plate?" Darren waved it off. "The chicken was cooked, still warm. It's fine. The greens came from the bin, same as every day. I don't have time to inspect every leaf." Nina shifted slightly, as if she wanted to intervene, but Graham gently raised a hand to stop her. He turned his gaze to Troy. "Did you hear that? Your employee doesn't understand, or worse, doesn't care about hygiene standards. This isn't an individual mistake. It's the product of a system you've allowed to rot." Troy opened his mouth as if to respond, then stopped. Graham didn't give him the chance. "Darren, clock out. You're done here." Darren glanced at Troy one last time but received nothing in return. He threw the rag into the sink, took off his apron, and walked out the back door. No one said goodbye. Graham looked back at the remaining staff. His eyes settled on Nina. "When was the last time you saw someone check food temperatures?" She hesitated for a moment, then answered softly, "About 3 or 4 weeks ago, when the health inspector made a surprise visit." "And since then, no one's done it again?" "No." "Did you report it to management?" "Yes, at least twice. I mentioned the meat being left out, the greens no longer being kept cold." "And what did Troy say?" "He told me to stop complaining." Troy turned away, jaw clenched, but said nothing. Graham exhaled slowly. He knew he couldn't change an entire system in one afternoon, but he could begin with silence, the kind of silence that kills a brand if no one listens in time. "Now," he said, "I want every employee working this shift to come out here." Without hesitation, 4 more appeared. Luis, who had been switching between dishes and prep work, Tessa, still wearing gloves for handling raw vegetables, Benny, the tattooed cashier, and Mira, a veteran cook whose name Graham had only ever seen on the payroll list. Sky had already left, and Troy now stood by the sink, as if this no longer concerned him. Graham stood before them, not with the air of an angry boss, but like a father watching something he built being eroded by neglect. "Let me ask you again, does anyone here believe this place is being run properly?" No one raised a hand. "Does anyone feel heard?" Still silence. Graham turned to Luis. "How long have you been working here?" "Almost a year." "Has anyone ever asked for your input on procedures?" "No one, but I did write some notes in the kitchen log." "Do you still have them?" "No, I think they were thrown out." Graham nodded, then pulled a small gray notebook from his pocket, the kitchen log. "You're right. I found a bunch of torn papers stuffed behind the mop sink." Luis sighed, half surprised, half resigned. Graham turned his gaze back to Troy. "Your employees aren't just ignored. They're made to feel like what they do is meaningless." Nina then stepped forward, not looking at Troy anymore, but directly at Graham. "We're not lazy. We haven't given up. But every time we speak up, it's brushed off as complaining. 1 day, then 2, then 7 months. In the end, the one responsible is always the quiet one working in the shadows." Graham didn't respond immediately. He turned to Luis and said, "From now on, you're the acting kitchen lead." Then to Nina, "You'll coordinate the front of house starting today." Neither of them reacted right away. They looked as if they couldn't believe what they just heard. "We'll close early today. I'll still pay for the full shift. Everyone gets 1 hour to eat and recover. After that, we start over by cleaning every corner of this place." He scanned the faces, slick with sweat and fatigue. "None of you have to fix this mess alone. I'll be starting over too, and this time, I won't let go again." That evening, as most of the storefronts along Capitol Hill's Main Street began to dim their lights, a faint glow still lingered in the walk-in fridge behind Harvest and Hearth, location number 9. It wasn't the automated lighting, but the beam of a handheld flashlight, reflecting off smeared labels stuck on top of expired food containers. Graham Ellison was crouched in the corner of the cold storage, one hand holding a clipboard, the other gloved in blue rubber, carefully inspecting each plastic tub inside the storage bin. Beside him was a half-filled industrial trash can, already heaped with discolored chicken pieces, moldy mixed greens, and sauce containers missing both labels and expiration dates. The air clung to him, a chilling blend of cold and rot. Luis stepped in through the side door, the scent of lemon and oil from the fish sandwich he had just eaten still on his hands. He froze when he saw Graham, the same man who had stood like a commanding boss that morning before the entire staff, now personally digging through trays like a backroom stockworker. "You're really doing that all by yourself?" Graham looked up and wiped his forehead with his elbow. I can't ask you all to clean up this mess if I'm the one who let it happen in the first place. Louise stepped further inside, eyes drifting to the two shelves above, where the restaurant usually stored its primary proteins. Those shelves haven't been rotated all week. I noticed yesterday there's a patch of freezer-burned chicken up there. Did you report it? Graham asked. Twice. Wrote it in the kitchen log, but no one ever responded. Graham nodded and pulled a small notebook from his back pocket. This one, right? Louise nodded. Yeah, that's it. Graham flipped through a few pages, then held it up to show Louise. Empty. Not a single note for the last 3 weeks. Louise gave a weary smirk. I figured they were torn out, probably trashed. I checked behind the mop sink once. That's exactly where I found them. Footsteps echoed from the hallway. Nina and Tessa entered, carrying new gloves, fresh food labels, and a roll of medical-grade trash bags. Nina glanced at the half-full bin, then over to Graham. Do you want us to start with the dry storage? Yes, Graham pointed to the far end of the hallway. Toss anything expired, relabel everything else from scratch. We'll restock from the distribution center tomorrow. Tessa noticed the clipboard in Graham's hand and furrowed her brow. You're logging everything yourself? I'm not the only one holding this place together, but I am the one most responsible for it. Graham stepped out of the cold storage, passing by the manager's office. He stopped, opened the door. The room was dark, thick with the smell of cold coffee and stale ink. The desk lamp was off. An old mug of coffee sat ringed in dry brown. On the wall-mounted whiteboard, a half-erased message in blue marker still lingered. Optimize by simplifying. Graham stared at it for a few seconds, then picked up the eraser and wiped it clean. No more hollow slogans. No more fake reminders about efficiency. Back in the kitchen, the sound had changed. The blaring background music was gone. In its place were the strokes of scrubbing brushes on tile, the rush of water into buckets, the soft clinks of stainless steel trays meeting. The air was quiet but rhythmic. Louise was scrubbing at the dish station. Nina and Tessa were reorganizing the dry goods with fresh labels. Benny was wiping down the entire front counter, and Mira, the quietest among them, was manually resetting the inventory sheet. Graham stood at the plating station, observing the scene like a conductor listening to an orchestra just beginning to rediscover its tempo. No one was laughing, but no one had their heads down. The presence in each movement signaled something important. They were truly showing up now. We'll clean every section, Graham said loudly. Then, and only then, will we talk about running service again. No cover-ups, no shortcuts. If something's broken, we fix it. If it's missing, we replace it. If it's toxic, we remove it completely. Tessa looked up, surprised. We're doing all that tonight? We'll do as much as we can. The rest, we finish before opening tomorrow. Luis lifted his bucket and moved to the hotline. Nina slipped silently into the dry pantry. Graham peeled a layer of foil off the back of the grill station. Old grease clung there like hardened wax. Time passed without complaint. By late evening, the air inside the restaurant began to smell different. Not like food, but like effort. The faint scent of disinfectant, the sharp tang of clean steel, the citrusy note of floor cleaner. It was the scent of a place beginning to cleanse itself. The next morning, Harvest and Hearth's Capitol Hill location opened in an unusually calm atmosphere, not because of anything grand, but because of the silence, the kind of silence that comes with order, with soft golden light newly adjusted from the LED system, with a fresh background music track that had replaced frantic electronic mixes with slow, clear acoustic guitar. The space seemed to inhale deeply and exhale, lighter. Graham arrived early, quietly entering through the side alley door, the same path he used to take when he was just a dishwasher at the first pop-up shop beneath the Aurora Bridge. The hallway no longer smelled of used oil or damp paper, but of clean lemon and warm metal. Luis was checking the fridge temperatures, the log sheet beside it fully filled out in black ink. All under 40 degrees, he said as he saw Graham, his tone short, needing no further explanation. Grill's been scrubbed, fire suppression system reset. Walk-in thermometer installed yesterday. Marcus helped. Got it done fast. Graham nodded. You're starting to settle into it. Luis only shrugged. I watched the old managers do it wrong for a whole year, learned a lot about what not to do. Nina walked in through the front door, wearing a freshly pressed apron and holding a cardboard box with newly printed menus. Menus are here, no more QR codes. People want something to hold. She handed one to Graham. The layout was clear, each dish listing full ingredients, including allergens. No more vague spring mix. The Caesar now lists romaine, kale, and shaved dill. Graham nodded, his voice sincere. Thank you for pushing for that. Nina said nothing more, just started placing menus into the counter drawers. Tessa was now guiding Aria, the new cold station hire, on how to slice avocado without crushing the center. As she walked in from the side door, her apron already speckled from prepping vegetables. She's got steady hands, Tessa said to Graham, not a single piece mangled. What's her name? Aria. Worked at a sushi place for a year. Wants more hours. I think she's worth the shot. She'll get it, Graham replied. At exactly 11 a.m., the doors opened. The first guests were a young couple in athletic wear ordering salads and grain bowls. A middle-aged woman in a blazer ordered the salmon and immediately asked, "Is this wild caught?" Nina didn't have to check. Yes, from a Northwest supplier, names listed on the blackboard behind you. Everything moved in rhythm, no crowding, no raised voices. Each station operated smoothly, simple yet full of energy. Around 12:30, Graham stepped to the far corner of the dining room and took a seat by the window. Today he wasn't in disguise, nor in a blazer, just a gray t-shirt and jeans. The staff knew who he was, the customers did not, and he liked it that way. A man in his 40s, wearing a sports jacket and Bluetooth headset, walked up to the counter. "Who's the manager here?" he asked. Nina stood up. "I'm in charge of front of house. How can I help?" "Last month I ate here. Salad was terrible. Chicken cold, greens wilted. I almost didn't come back." Nina nodded. "I'm sorry you had that experience. What will you be having today?" "Same thing. Grilled chicken Caesar." He paused a beat, then added, "And this time, perfect." Nina gave a small smile. "I'm glad to hear that." "What changed?" he asked. She glanced toward Graham, then back. "We did." By around 2, the place began to quiet down. Graham returned to the kitchen, where Luis was finishing the prep board. "You look like you've got the rhythm now." Still a few slips. Marcus burned the first batch of tofu, but he threw it out, started over, no hiding it. "And you think he's got the stuff to last?" Luis paused, then nodded. "Shows up early, leaves it cleaner than he found it. I think he might." Graham nodded and extended his hand. "Then it's official. Starting next week, you're the kitchen manager, comes with salary, benefits, and your first task, train the next crew. No more one person carrying an entire station alone." Luis shook his hand. No fanfare, just the right amount of firmness. "That's fair." A seed had taken root, and this time it wasn't planted in hollow pride, but in slow, enduring trust. Graham and Nina walked slowly into the manager's office, the same room they had cleaned the night before. The whiteboard that once bore the hollow slogan, "Optimize by simplifying," was now gone, replaced by a clearly written shift schedule and a handwritten onboarding checklist for new staff, created by the team themselves. Graham pulled out a chair, sat down at the desk, and opened his laptop. The screen displayed a performance report filled with garish colors, red, orange, and yellow bars blinking like a spaceship control panel, but Graham paid no attention to the numbers. "Take a look at this chart," he said, turning the screen toward Nina. She leaned in and glanced at it. 6 shifts last month, and I was rated as underperforming. Because you stayed late, covering stations for people who didn't show up. Nina frowned. The system doesn't log that context. Exactly. It tracks hours and pay, never asks why. She nodded, her expression shifting from skepticism to clarity. Graham closed the laptop. "We're getting rid of the system not just at this location, but across the entire chain." Nina looked up, stunned. "Seriously?" "I won't let an algorithm evaluate people like machines anymore. From now on, performance will be measured by the quality of our food, the stability of the team, and the trust of our customers, not just profit margins. She clenched her hands into a small fist. You think corporate will go for that? They'll agree, or they'll be out of the game. Graham didn't raise his voice, but the resolve in his eyes quieted the entire room. Moments later, Nina stood up. I'll head back to the counter. Break's over. Graham nodded. Good. I'll take care of the rest. As she left the office, Graham stayed behind for a few seconds, listening to the sounds from the kitchen, the steady rhythm of a chopping knife, the soft thud of refrigerator doors opening and closing, someone calling out gently to avoid disrupting the breath the restaurant had just regained. That night, the store closed later than usual, not because of delays or disarray, but because no one was in a rush to leave. It was as if they were being held there by the very rhythm they had just rediscovered. Out in the back lot, there was no plan, no emails, no schedules, but the team instinctively pulled out folding chairs, a small Bluetooth speaker played quiet music, and leftover salad boxes were shared like rewards after an unspoken battle. Tessa leaned against the wall, water bottle in hand, talking to Arya about knife techniques. Marcus sat on an overturned milk crate, bursting into laughter at one of Luis's jokes. Nina, for the first time in months, wasn't busy, just sat quietly, hands folded, eyes calm. Graham stepped out into the lot, holding a tray of mint tea and plastic cups. I've got one last thing, he said. No one frowned. No one looked away. I know this week has been heavy. I've asked too much. Some of you stepped into roles you never signed up for. Some of you cleaned up messes you didn't make, but you did it. He poured the tea, handing out the cups. The night air was cool, the rustle of paper cups soft in everyone's hands. From today on, to me, this brand isn't just a product. It's the people inside it. That means you. And from here forward, everything will revolve around that. No one clapped. No one jumped up. But they all sat there quietly, as if that was answer enough. They raised their cups not as a ritual, not with a shout, just as a confirmation among those who had dared to begin again. No slogans, no spotlights, just trust in one another and in someone willing to stand in the dark, take the blame, and start over with them. 2 days later, the restaurant opened its doors to a soft breeze from Broadway Avenue. Every movement inside was no longer driven by fear or frustration, but by something few would have believed still existed in a place that had once rotted from with indignity. The kitchen moved with steady rhythm, not rushed, but precise. From prep station to the hotline, every step was carried out with a clear understanding of why it mattered. Graham arrived through the side door as usual, sleeves rolled high, no clipboard, no charts. The first thing he did was walk past the storage area, every container now labeled with entry date, opening date, and expiration date. No one was flipping lids to guess the smell anymore. No more probably still good. Luis was inspecting the cold line, Marcus noting temperatures by hand. Nina stood near the register, leading the pre-shift meeting. The new hires among them, Arya and a boy named Theo, listened quietly. Graham said nothing. He simply observed, and they knew he was there, but no one looked for his approval. They didn't need to. As he approached the cold line, he saw Arya working with avocados, the knife blades slipping beneath the skin, spinning cleanly as if she'd done it 100 times before. She looked up and gave a small nod, not to score points, just out of respect. Graham nodded back, then moved on. At exactly 11, the doors opened. A familiar stream of customers flowed in. A nurse in scrubs holding her child on one hip, 2 college students in workout gear, a middle-aged man in a blazer and Bluetooth headset, clearly office-bound. Graham sat in the back as usual, observing without intervening. Nina stood at the register when the man approached. "You the manager?" he asked. "I oversee front of house," Nina replied. "I came here last month. The salad was awful. Chicken was cold. Greens were limp. I didn't think I'd come back." She didn't flinch. "I'm sorry for that. But today," he paused, "the food is perfect. Absolutely perfect. She smiled, this time deeper than before. We've changed. After the lunch rush, Graham walked into the kitchen where Luis was reviewing the end-of-day checklist. The kitchen's solid now, Graham said. We lost people, but what remains is real. Luis looked up. Everything's moving in the right direction. At that moment, Marcus walked by carrying a tray of freshly delivered chicken. He gave it a quick sniff, then shook his head. Too close to date, not sure it'll hold up for tomorrow. Without needing instruction, he set the tray aside and wrote "Return" on the label. Graham watched the gesture, said nothing, simply gave Marcus a light pat on the shoulder. No praise needed, just confirmation. A few minutes later, Nina stepped in holding the new 2-week shift schedule. I condensed the open hours so the team can cross-train. Graham glanced over. Good structure, easy to scale. You asked me once if I wanted to stay long-term, she said. I think I already have. The only difference is now it has a name. Graham smiled lightly. Now it also has a budget and decision-making power. Nina nodded. Then I'll start with one small change, cutting out solo cold line shifts. No one should run that station alone. Exactly, Graham replied. And you'll train the new team. She paused for a second, then nodded. All right, I'm staying. They stepped into the office together. The old whiteboard had been replaced with a pinboard crowded with sticky notes, training schedules, customer feedback, internal suggestions. Graham opened his laptop and scrolled through the performance dashboard. The old system was still there, but now each entry had handwritten annotations, explanations, context. No one was labeled underperforming just for staying late to save a collapsing shift. This system used to punish anyone who went above and beyond, Graham said. From now on, it no longer gets to judge anyone. Nina said nothing, only nodded. She didn't need more reasons to believe the place was changing. She had lived that change, hour by hour, shift by shift. That night, the restaurant closed on time, but no one rushed to clean up. Not because they were lazy, but because no one felt the need to escape a place that once weighed them down. After closing, each team member quietly made their way to the back lot. There were no calls, no assignments, just a newly formed habit, as if everyone understood that staying a little longer together simply felt right. Tessa pulled out a folding chair. Marcus brought an overturned milk crate to sit on. Luis carried a small Bluetooth speaker, and Aria arrived with a pitcher of mint lemonade. Nina came out last, leaning against the wall, arms crossed not as the one in charge, but as the one keeping rhythm. Graham stepped out from inside, this time carrying no tray of tea, no parting instructions. He brought only himself, no clipboard, no dashboards. Once everyone had settled, he stood at the center of that small circle and spoke. Do you all know what we've just done here? No one answered, but no one looked away. We didn't just fix a kitchen. We repaired the entire system that allowed it to rot. He walked slowly past each person as he continued. Every company says the customer comes first, but I'll say this: if the team isn't heard, if they aren't protected, then the customer never had a real chance to be served properly. They remained silent, but everyone's eyes were on him, not because he was the owner, but because he had truly shown up. This place is only strong when the people inside it are steady. From now on, we build from that foundation. He looked at each one in turn. Luis, who changed the kitchen with quiet persistence instead of titles. Tessa, who silently filled every gap without complaint. Marcus, who owned his mistakes and fixed them the same day. Aria, just a few days in, who already carried a deep respect for the craft. And Nina, who didn't just speak the truth, but stayed to see it through. No more blaming the system. From now on, we are the system. A pause lingered. Then Tessa raised her cup. To a clean kitchen. Luis laughed and raised his too. To an honest crew. Nina lifted hers last. And to never letting it all slide again. They clinked their plastic cups gently. No loud clinks, no camera flashes. Just the quiet sense of sitting among people who had just made it through the longest shift together, not in hours, but in meaning. A new beginning, without grand announcements, just the presence of one another. Graham sat down, leaned back. He looked at them, and for the first time in years, he didn't feel any distance between himself and the team. No more hierarchy, no more walls of reports. Only people who had chosen to stay, who had chosen to change, and this time, they knew exactly why. 2 days later, as Graham stepped through the side employee entrance, the restaurant was already ready to open. But this time, readiness didn't come from mechanical habit or pressure. It came from quiet initiative. The sound of water running at the sink, knives tapping rhythmically on cutting boards, freshly printed labels bearing ingredients and expiration dates. Every movement synced like a symphony that no longer needed a conductor. The walk-in fridge was so clean, it reflected the overhead lights off the stainless steel surfaces. Containers were arranged in tidy rows, colors clear and rotated properly. Luis was checking the cold storage temperatures when Graham entered. "All under 40, he said, still writing notes. "The grill's been reset. Cold station is stable. Marcus ran the fire suppression check this morning. He did it on his own." Graham nodded. "Now that's a real kitchen." Luis smiled slightly. "A kitchen where people actually want to show up." Nina appeared from the front, carrying a stack of updated menus. Allergen info is now complete. No more mixed greens. It's kale, romaine, and shaved dill. Graham flipped through one and nodded. Clear, transparent. "You really pushed for this," she shrugged. "Customers deserve to know what they're eating." At exactly 11, the doors opened. The first stream of customers came in regulars, newcomers, a woman in scrubs holding a toddler, a couple in athletic wear, a young man in a button-up shirt. Orders were taken quickly. No one had to repeat themselves. When one guest asked about the salmon's origin, Nina answered without hesitation, her voice steady. "Northwest supplier names on the chalkboard behind you." She didn't have to look back. She knew. And the customer knew she knew. Around 12:45, a middle-aged man in a blazer with a Bluetooth headset stepped up to the counter. "I came here last month," he said, his tone firm but not hostile. "The salad was terrible. Chicken cold, greens wilted. I didn't think I'd return." Nina didn't flinch. "I'm sorry for that experience. What will you have today?" "Same dish, but this time perfect. Surprisingly perfect." She smiled. "We've changed." After lunch, Graham returned to the kitchen where Luis was reviewing the end-of-day checklist. "Everything's flowing now," Graham said. "No more loose gears." Luis nodded. "The whole crew has caught the rhythm. Took time, but now it's ours." Marcus was inspecting a tray of chicken. He took a gentle sniff, eyes narrowing, then quietly set it aside. "Too close to date. Doesn't meet the standard." He labeled it return without waiting for instructions. Graham watched the moment, then gave him a light pat on the shoulder. "No waiting for approval, no need for directives. You did the right thing." Marcus said nothing, just nodded, as if that confirmation was all he needed. Nina walked in with the upcoming shift schedule. "I've adjusted the next 2 weeks, built in time for cross-training, and I made sure everyone has real breaks." Graham took it, scanned, then nodded. "Solid structure. Good not just for now, but for the next 3 months." She glanced around. "I think I've been in this role for a while already. Now it just comes with a name tag," Graham chuckled. "And authority, budget, a voice, and the next one in line will be trained by you." Nina gave a soft nod. "Then we begin today." A few hours after the restaurant closed, there was no bell, no scheduled meeting, yet one by one, the team quietly drifted out to the back lot. No one felt dragged along. No one glanced at their watch. It was simply a deeply human rhythm, a desire to stay just a little longer. Tessa brought 2 folding chairs, Luis carried a small speaker, Aria held a jug of mint water. Marcus sat cross-legged on the wooden deck, flipping through the next day's prep schedule. Nina leaned gently against the wall like a steady, silent anchor. Graham came out last, this time bringing nothing, not tea, not a clipboard, just himself. He looked at each familiar face, those who had seen this restaurant at its lowest point. Then he asked, "Do you know what it is we just did?" Silence. No one nodded, but no one looked away. They waited for him to go on. We didn't just clean a kitchen. We rebuilt the culture that once allowed everything to fall apart. His voice wasn't loud, not theatrical, but it carried the quiet weight of a sharp blade cutting through the last of the fat. Every company says customers come first, but if employees themselves aren't respected, heard, and protected, then there are no customers truly being served. He looked from Nina to Luis, then to Marcus, Tessa, and Aria. Each of them had done more than their title, more than their paid hours. From now on, we make no more excuses, no more blaming the system, because we are the system. A silence stretched, thin as thread, just taut enough. Then Tessa raised her cup. To kitchens that are respected. Luis followed. To teams that care. Nina, this time not by reflex but by choice, lifted her cup. To the promise that we won't let it all slide again. They clinked cups softly, just enough to touch. No one stood up to take photos. No one needed to post online. They didn't need proof beyond the quiet presence of one another that something once broken had been mended, not by protocols, but by truth. 2 days later, when the restaurant reopened, it was still the same regulars, the same soft music, the same warm yellow lights. But the biggest change wasn't in the signage or the menu. It was in something no KPI could measure: the atmosphere of a place where no one had to brace themselves, where no one needed to wear a mask to survive. Luis called out the cold line temperatures. Marcus recorded them. Nina ran a quick pre-shift huddle. Aria sliced avocados with even precision. No one asked for approval. No one had to pretend. Graham walked past the counter. No hat, no sunglasses, no need to hide anymore. At 12:50, the man who had complained the month before returned. "I almost didn't come back," he said. "But today the same salad is perfect. What changed?" Nina smiled, this time without glancing at Graham. "We changed." Hours later, when the evening shift ended, the team didn't rush out the door. They lingered in the back lot like clockwork. No one spoke much. Just the sound of breathing slowing down, of feet no longer hurrying. Graham stepped out, stood among them, and this time, there was nothing more to say. Because sometimes what truly matters isn't what you proclaim, but the fact that you stay behind until the end, making sure no one is left behind. In a world where data and metrics dictate every decision, it's easy to forget that the one thing that truly sustains an organization is people. Culture doesn't collapse in a day. It erodes hour by hour with every ignored warning, every unheard employee, every shift where someone stops being seen. But as the story of Graham and his team at that small restaurant proves, when a leader is willing to return, to set aside authority and lead with trust, even what seemed lost can be brought back to life. If you believe that culture isn't just written on paper but begins with how we treat one another, then hit like to help spread this message. And subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the stories that truly reach into the heart of justice and humanity. Lastly, leave a comment with the phrase "build back together" so we know you too believe in a journey that starts from within. We're not just fixing a system. We're learning again what it means to be human.